A surprise surge is hitting the markets right now. Absolute chaos is going on. Well, we're going to break it down for you. It's going to be a good one. And this is going to be, I think, the show that maybe tells us exactly where crypto is going. So you don't want to miss it. I want to thank our sponsor, and that is BTCC. If you're looking at trading, now is the time to do it because volatility is in the water. And when volatility hits, you need a place to go to start to achieve some trades. And of course, BTCC is the place for you. You guys get into copy trading. And of course, you can get a 10% bonus just by using our link down below. Get into that. There's also some discounts on trading fees, all sorts of benefits when you use our link. So use that and get going. I'm going to have Gareth Soloway on the show here momentarily, but I want to play a clip of Gareth talking about this market as we see it today. Take a look.
This was the trend line where I was able to call the top on Bitcoin, right? And by the way, keep in mind, I'm not calling for a new bull market in crypto, right? I still actually do think it's going to go lower. But for me, I'm a swing trader. So if I see a bullish setup, I'm going to play it long. When I see a bearish setup, I'm going to play it short. I call it like I see it in the charts because the charts are the only thing that's unbiased.
I like it. Call it like you see it. Bringing in Gareth Soloway. How are you, Gareth? How's things going?
I'm good. Good to see you, Paul.
When we first got on, I was like, hey, it's a sad day in crypto. We're actually moving, which is unusual right now. Of course, we're looking at the poll, and I have to go with this one. What happens first? Bitcoin 80K or 50K? Where are you going on this chart, Gareth?
I think it's going to 80K. I think it's going to 80K. And I've been saying that for the last week or so, even as it's chopped sideways to lower.
Look at that. I mean, people are just edgy. They just don't believe it right now. They're in disbelief, Gareth, that we're on a small run. When you look at the Bitcoin chart, why are you seeing this right now as a short-term trade opportunity?
Yeah, so a couple reasons. We could take a look at the chart on Bitcoin. And this is the beautiful thing about it, right, is that this chart was telling us a bigger run was coming in crypto as a whole and specifically Bitcoin. Here's your reversal green candle after that big flush out and all that panic where we went down to 60K. Reversal, and then all of these candles stayed within that green portion right here. That's a classic technical bullish consolidation pattern. Now we're seeing the results. And I said this to you earlier when we weren't on air yet, but I did a video just over the weekend talking about how this was a bullish setup and we were going to go. And 9 out of every 10 comments were, Gareth's a clown. He knows nothing. We're going down to 30 to 40K. And I literally went and bought more crypto when I saw that, because when sentiment is that negative, it sets up for a near-term short squeeze. And that's exactly what we're getting.
Well, 60 has been kind of the target zone I think a lot of people have been pointing to. And could we get there? We got close around 62. I was looking at your other tweet right here, crypto surging, bull flag on Bitcoin. This is what you're talking about. Alts potentially squeezing. While it isn't the start of a new bull market, you think that we could see the 80 to 85. What would draw you out to 85K versus 80? Because that's still a pretty significant move in itself.
Yes, and that's a good question. And just looking at the chart, it's really a chart zone, right? And so you can see the lowest point we hit back in November was down here, and then the higher areas that we chopped around were in this 85 range. So as a technician, we have to admit that we never are going to pick the exact high or the exact low. We just try to get generally close, and this gives us that range of 5K, basically 80 to 85. Now, I think what gets us to 85 is I still think we're going to get positive legislation. I know it's been stalled out, but I do think as we get closer to the midterms, there's going to be a push to get those crypto votes again for the midterms, and that means a more positive outcome in the legislation.
Well, I think it's almost as I believe that somebody knows something. I'll show you a tweet here that I put out last night that was one of my predictions for Friday's summit, but this is a good statement as well. Over 400,000 Bitcoin were accumulated between 60 and 70K. This, of course, coming in, I think BlackRock, Master both looking at acquisition zones in here, along with some other money managers out there that are taking a dip into Bitcoin. And of course, that's what we're starting to see now with the market. What would you say when you look at what happened last night with the State of the Union, what Trump was doing in terms of where he thinks the country is going, the fact that we didn't have anything mentioned about digital assets or Bitcoin? What was your take on that? Where do you stand?
Yeah, I think honestly the market was already primed, and even though he didn't really talk about crypto much, I think it was
Hmm.
more of a relief that there was nothing negative. It's almost like the market was pricing in a worst case scenario. So anything less than worst case, even a non-mention, is a positive here. Like for instance, I think there was a fear that he was going to attack the crypto players and try to push for the banks to be the winner in this legislation, and he didn't do that. And that right there is a small positive. And it doesn't take a lot to create a short squeeze or a panic buy when everyone is bearish in the crypto space.
All right, so not a lot there. Let me ask you this. You look at Trump's first year in office, everything that's happened, which is a lot. Where would you give him on a 1 to 10, 10 being best, 1 being worst?
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's a loaded question, number
Come
one,
on,
Paul, because I'm
Gareth.
gonna annoy some people one way or the other. But I would say in the four-ish range, right? There
Four-ish,
I was
okay.
never a big fan of tariffs, just to be fair on that. I do think that ultimately us as Americans end up paying for it one way or the other through higher prices. And overall, I think it's a little disappointing being in crypto that a lot of the promises, it didn't seem to be fulfilled as much as at least I hoped. I don't know what you thought on that, but I didn't like that when he first got in, he had the Trump coin, and that
Yeah.
ultimately kind of looks like a rug pull at this point. So there's these type of things that I think were generally more negative than positive, but certainly it wasn't a one. It's not a worst case.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things that he has done from a policy standpoint that I agree with. But man, on the crypto side, I do feel that the industry has been rug pulled. This was not really what we voted for. And I think it's showing out more and more. Now, the real question is it too late to be able to get a real, I mean, because you think about this, there was no altcoin market, zero. And if you're in the crypto industry over the past decade, we've always had that one thing that changed was that Trump took office. So that in itself, I think, had a lot to go against it. Now you're looking at the S&P 500. I've got a clip here of Jamie Dimon talking about weird things happening. Take a look.
One of the people who was there through the financial crisis at the helm of the big bank. He's the only one at this point.
He's the lone man standing, right, among those big banks.
What is he seeing?
He's referencing lending practices that if you are going to affirm, let's keep with Apollo, but there are so many others that we could use as examples. The pricing on these loans is so much different than, let's say, how you price Apple's stock. It's not as liquid, and so there might be underlying stress, but the price doesn't reflect that. But if there gets to a point like we've seen with some of the cockroach examples where at the end of the day there's massive selling and then the price does have to reflect the underlying stresses, that's when, if those things start to pile up, it's a snowball effect.
Yeah. And he's talking about private credit. Of course, this has been, kind of a snowball effect in general. But before we get into that, because I want to show a clip, or actually a tweet here from Mohammed El Arain, I want to talk about Bitcoin, because you're saying that this is a short-term run and that we could see a retracement. If it does go to the 80, 85, where do you think the pullback will come to?
So, my guess is we're on the precipice of a larger issue with the overall economy and the markets. And I think this private credit is starting to speak to it. I think the fact that we saw an AMD deal yesterday with Meta where they get a 5-year chip deal. So Meta will buy chips for 5 years, but they had to give up warrants for essentially 10% of AMD. This is more of that, you give me this, I'll give you this back. It's something we saw earlier in 2025, and it's not healthy for the sector. And ultimately, we're even seeing the software stocks starting to collapse, even though they're due for a bounce and are getting a bounce. And these are all systematic signs of a bubble in the AI space. And I do worry that the private credit market is already showing the cracks there. So if that does occur, after a bounce to 80 to 85, I could see us honestly going down into the 50s or the 40s on Bitcoin, but that would be with a larger stock market sell-off.
All right, so so Bitcoin sell-off there, some of the things that could antagonize the market being private credit. Here's Mohammed talking about this canary in the coal mine moment, similar to August 2007. The question will be on the mind of some investors and policymakers that we're now dealing with private credit group, much like Blue Owl, will permanently restrict investors from withdrawing their cash. This would be a major hit. And if you look at where that's going, you look at risk assets, and especially at Bitcoin in general, how does this end up especially when you're looking at the scenario that we're dealing with right now, where Bitcoin dominance is falling, all coins are surging right now. There's going to be a pivot point here where we could see some massive pullbacks. Would this be one of the catalysts to do that?
I do think so, right? And I think it's important to remember that even though you or me, and specifically me, I can't speak for you, I do view still Bitcoin in that digital gold eventually growing into that. It still is going to be influenced by fear and panic, right? I mean, fear and panic, people ask questions later, they sell first. And I do think that's the risk here, is that ultimately, if the markets start to drop, if there's a crisis, people are going to sell everything initially, then there'll be the bottom fishers that start to pick things up on the cheap.
All right, so let's take a look. I want to go to the S&P 500 with you real quick. And in general, if you look at the S&P 500, Dimon's kind of mentioning that this could see a bit of a return. And what I mean by that is a major down pressure on the S&P 500. That obviously would have a trickle effect into crypto and risk assets, probably putting more strength into gold and metals and maybe a handful of other assets. Where do you see the S&P 500 going right now?
Yeah, I do think the S&P is in a topping pattern. I would call it a rounded top. You can see that from the April lows here, which was the initial tariff sell-off, we had this great blasting up move. It took us right to the high end of this parallel. And just to zoom out on this again, this parallel takes into account the COVID low, the bear market of 2022 lows on the S&P, and the liberation sell-off low here. And the parallel then takes you up to the bull market highs of 2021, and that's right where we hit here. Ever since that, we've had basically retail investors levering up, putting more leverage into the market. But notice how the market's not able to really go up. This is where you have institutions selling into it. So institutions are selling into retail buying, which is what creates a rounded top. And even if we do pop, there's so much resistance up here. The path of least resistance inevitably is to the downside pretty sharply. And so I am bearish the rest of the year, at least for now, on the markets.
On the S&P. Here was your tweet. This was the statement right here that kind of got me a little bit sideways, and that is that Besant is saying we are concerned. So, and he has not been concerned for the last year really, but now all of a sudden he's in a position where they're actually seeing some of the things that I think you're seeing, which is potentially a top. Do you think it is the AI fluff right now and a lot of the software that's been repriced? And if so, do you think any of that comes back in 27?
Yeah, so I think the biggest risk and listen, the software stocks, many of them have been discounted by 40, 50, 60%. In fact, I was just talking about Workday today. Workday, it's a cloud player, and it was down since the beginning of the year, 40+% just since January. And so, you're going to get these reflex bounces at levels like we're at, but the thing is, everyone's levered up in this AI situation. They're spending as much money, raising as much debt to spend even more. And if you just have a slight situation where the monetization of that spend is pushed out 1 year, you will have massive bankruptcies. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And if you look at you or me, yeah, sure, I use Gemini, I use Claude, I use, ChatGPT, but what are we paying for that? $20 a month? When does it come to the point where these companies that are spending $200 billion a year can monetize it more? And if that doesn't happen for a couple extra years, major bankruptcies on the horizon.
All right, beyond that, let's move over to ETH, because now you're scaring me, Gareth. You got things going over there. I got to go to something a little bit more lighthearted, which is usually Tom Lee's Twitter stream, which is the ETH bags are heavy. He's holding it on, man. I love it. Nike pig there. You look at the ETH chart right now. And of course, ETH correcting well above 2,000 now. This is a nice move on Ethereum. But where do you place this one if Bitcoin goes to 85?
Yeah, so like Bitcoin, I'm long ETH here. You could see the classic consolidation bull flag in here. It's breaking out above the upper end. You need to see it close above here today. Obviously, we don't want to see a pullback intraday below that line. Assuming that holds, I do think you get that short squeeze and buying frenzy that could take us up to this 26 to about 2,800 marker. Okay. Now, again, on a percentage basis, that's a fantastic move. Yep. Just even from today's high, we could be looking at 27 to 35 or 36% upside just in the coming week or two. And I think that's realistically what my target is in the near term. Now, once it gets there, look at all this resistance. I mean, there's going to be a wall, like a crazy thick wall here. Not to say it can't get through, but it's good. This is going to be the test here right at this 26 to 2,800 marker.
All right, you give me 26 to 28. We're sitting at an 85K Bitcoin. We know where we could see some retracement there. On ETH, where do you think we could see retracement to? Do we get a sub 1500 ETH at some point down the road?
That's tough. So again, I haven't done as much in-depth research on ETH, but I will say that at least what we see down here on the chart is that there's a ton of major support around that 1500 marker. So I would think that if we did see Bitcoin going sub 50,000, we'd have to assume ETH is probably in that same range, 15 to 1400. I would definitely be a buyer down there just based on that. If we get that, that's I would look at that as a long-term gift.
Coming in. Well, listen, you got Bitwise over here painting a new picture. It looks like a Mona Lisa. Financial markets are moving on chain. You got SEC launching Project Crypto. BlackRock says every stock, every bond. This just looks a little too convenient to me when I see things like this happening right now. Okay, where's the secret here behind this tweet? What am I missing here?
I don't know if you're missing anything, to be honest. I mean, I think that, again, you look at Circle had earnings this morning. They were fantastic earnings,
off
right?
the charts, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
charts.
there's a tokenization going on here. Now, again, individually on the altcoins, you don't know which ones are going to be the winners or losers. I still think Bitcoin is the best play to bank on going forward. But there's no doubt that tokenization and these stable coins are a major part of the future of the U.S. and the world. And therefore, it's going to continue to happen.
I like it. All right, we're gonna put you on the spot here between Ethereum and Solana, because these are the two winners right now, I think, that come out of what we'll see in the short term. You got Tom Lee over here. We know where he stands. More signs of meaningful low in place. Stock becomes consensus short. Don't worry about it. Hence, the stock can rise on bad news. He thinks that the bad news is priced in. This, of course, all goes into things that are happening around both ETH as well as Solana. Where would you stand right now? ETH, Solana. Where's my play?
Well, just because Tom Lee's on ETH, I'm going to choose Solana. We're going to go on that direction here. So I'll take that side of the coin, even though, honestly, they're both altcoins. They probably move together. But look at this beautiful pattern. In technical analysis, this was called a bottoming tail, which is a major reversal signal. And I just want to point out to people is that it's not like we should be surprised at the move today. I know a lot of people are, but the signs were there. I mean, when you get a bottoming tail in a chart as a technician, I jump up and down and I take note of these type of signals, and it's a bullish reversal signal. And so now the question is, how high do we go? Solana, you have upside to about the 111 to 120 level. If it can break out of that, then you're talking about massive upside. And just from the speed side of it, I'll take Solana.
Okay, Solana on that one, which I like. I think this is the one that I would probably play as well. However, you could take the alternative route on ETH and go BMNR. This kind of just shows you right there. Here's how much Ethereum that Tom Lee and Bitmine and BMNR have held, and they continue to pile in on top of this thing. Look at that, man. This is crazy, wow, the amount of ETH they have been acquiring. What about BMNR on this? When is BMNR a buy?
That's a good question, BMNR here. Let me just take a look at the chart. So, I mean, the chart's obviously popping today, no doubt about it. And it's been a long, long downtrend. You know, the one thing I would say, and this is one of the things that I've done recently with MicroStrategies, is I would add up all the ETH that they own, and I would buy it when it's at a discount. So if we know, what we know is that recently on MicroStrategy, MSTR, once it got down really below this area, it's then started to be cheaper than the Bitcoin that they hold on their balance sheet, right? And I think that's the kicker. And so again, I don't know. I haven't calculated it out on BMNR, but that would be the trick, is if I can buy ETH myself cheaper than BMNR overall, then I would do that. If I can't, then I would go with BMNR.
Okay. All right. There you go. It is above NAV based on where it is right now. So, but it has been obviously in a position that maybe if ETH does get a run here, this could be, you know, an alternative play if you're looking at hedging against that. Another token that we're watching right now that had some pretty good movement was SWI. They had some news shipping 3 ETFs in under 7 days, so that was good news for them. Then you have, of course, this happening, which was Meta stablecoin news. Let's remember also that a lot of the SWI guys came out of that project years ago off of Meta. Speculation around that. Where would you be right now on SWI? Would you be in a position to buy it, sell it, or hold it?
Yeah, I think so. Number one, I'm holding it right now, but I would be a buyer here as well. And again, going to the chart, it's just all about the chart. You get the reversal signal, then all this choppy sideways action. Based on this, the bulls want to see a breakout above this 103 level. If we can get a breakout above 103, I actually think you can run all the way to about $1.34 to $1.35. That will be your first big resistance zone. So again, I'd be a buyer here based on how low it is on the chart with max upside. And again, the beauty of this too is, think about this. If you're an investor and you want to be aggressive, just keep your stop below this low. And so you're risking less than the reward to that next target. And as a trader, if you're disciplined enough, you can play it that way.
Yeah. Let's talk about Avalanche. This has been another one that has been down at the bottom for quite some time. Many people kind of pointing to the bottom and what it might look like. Fear and greed is sitting at extreme levels. We've seen that now. Maybe we'll see a little bit of adjustment, but a lot of people buying Avalanche right now at its lowest point ever. What do you think about AVAX? Is this still a token that you would make a play on?
It is, yeah. So I had a position. I did take half off the table for a little bit of a gain today, but I'm holding the remainder as kind of like my good luck amount, and I want to see this thing. First resistance is going to be around 1135. That's this former pivot low. But aside from that, the other factor I'm watching closely, there's a trend line here, and look at this. You actually had the breakout literally 2 weeks ago, right here. And so that was the first signal that a bull run is likely starting, even though it came lower since then. It never took out the lows down here at this very lowest point, and now you're getting the push. So we got to see this thing take out this 980, 985 level. If it does, it should shoot up to about $11.35.
All right, a little softer move on Avalanche. Let's jump over to XRP. Of course, many people speculating around XRP, what could happen, especially if clarity goes through. Likelihood is we'll see a lot of the market move, including Ethereum, Solana, and et cetera. Where would you place XRP trading right now? I think it's around 140 today.
Yeah, so XRP is really interesting because it was holding this massive support line for so long, and now it's broken. So essentially what that means is it's crossed over to the weaker side. It still should reattack this level, but as a technician, you got to see XRP take out this area. You have the downsloping, descending trend line. You have this former level right through here that was all this support. Now it becomes resistance. So essentially between 160 and essentially 195, that's going to be resistance anywhere in there. If you can breach essentially $2, that's where the big move comes. And I think you're right. The Clarity Act, you get that through, you have a good shot of breaking through this level. Until then, I think you have to err on the side of caution. I think it goes up to 160, 190, but you probably take a little chips off the table at that level.
What move would that be at 160, 190 from where it's trading right now?
So the low end would be about an 11 to 12% move, and then all the way up to about a 33% move. And again, for crypto, we know how that works. That's like a day's move potentially in crypto. But that's the zone where I would still be skeptical. If it can get through 2 and hold above, that's like golden chance right there for big upside.
All right, so we do have the White House Crypto Summit coming up on Friday. Sachs is going to be there. Hopefully we've got a deal in play. If you look at the poly market, it jumped above, well, it's hovering right around 50% right now as we record this in terms of clarity going through. Do you think there's been a truce in the back room, and maybe that's some of the freedom that we've seen moving into the market right now? Because there's a lot of liquidity coming into the market today.
That's
what's your opinion?
My theory is that the markets are expecting, and I think rightly so, that there might be some positive movement. If you have this conference, this crypto conference at the White House coming up, it's very likely that could be the spot where positive news is released, right? And it's you mentioned there were some bigger buyers accumulating. We know that the president tends to like to let news slip out a little bit to certain individuals, and it's very likely that's our tea leaves or our breadcrumbs that something is going on, that something positive will happen. And I think the market's smart enough to sniff that out. And it's probably why we're starting to see the surge today.
Remember this, though, guys. Fridays, I hate them, and I love them at the same time. Fridays is usually when we get the bad news and when we get the good news that accelerate into the weekends, where you get these explosive weekends that most people can't take advantage of except for those kind of in the game. So Friday afternoon, watch out, because this crypto summit may yield some very interesting things. happening then. Gareth Soloway, man, it was good catching up with you. Great to have you back on the show. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, thanks, Paul. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
If you like this video, hit like and subscribe, drop a comment down below, and also join our free private member group. The link is in the description.